Satwik Seshasai. He is a technology executive and AI strategist, currently serving as the founding CTO of Atria Health. He has over 20 years of experience in AI and health technology and focuses on harnessing AI to drive global growth and facilitate transformative solutions in various sectors. Satwik, are you with us?
I am, yeah. Let me start sharing and I'll jump in. All right. Well, thanks very much for including me. For those who don't know, I was set to present yesterday in the in-person session. We switched to today, so I'm in my car because I hadn't planned to be here. So I apologize for the odd location, but hopefully the connection stays good and we can go through this. So in yesterday's session and again in the couple today, there's been a lot of discussion around governing AI and really looking at it from kind of a risk mitigation perspective and from the perspective, what I consider to be, an appropriate set of defenses that we have to think about. How do we make sure, the wrong things don't happen from our use of AI? I wanted to kind of flip the discussion a little bit and talk about some of the opportunities that exist in reflecting on my own career and in talking with Deanna about some of the goals not only for this conference but for the for the AI initiative that we hopefully will be able to grow from this event. We were talking about how we should really be oriented around where is some of the upside that we can extract from AI, especially towards the goal of global justice. And then how can we use that to inspire all of the proper kind of governance and regulation that needs to be in place to to safely achieve those outcomes. And as I think about my own background, I've been involved in a number of companies across a number of different industries over the last couple decades. And one of the common themes across all of them is that, we've essentially in different ways deployed artificial intelligence to create growth and opportunity in an industry where, there was a lot of assets, there was a lot of, opportunity, but, AI kind of provided a mechanism for for generating and realizing that opportunity. And so in reflecting on that over the last 20 years, the perspective I want to bring to this group is that while we're talking about this as a relatively recent phenomenon and one where there's been rapid advancement in the last year, there's been many signals of, the type of progress that's possible over the last, years or decades. There's most definitely a shift from, what I would consider to be more kind of predictive AI, AI that was more quantitative, more analytical, and able to take data and predict what what are some of the signals that are inherent in that data set. And there's been a shift from that to more generative AI, where with the modern set of tools and capabilities, we have the ability to kind of generate new content, generate new insights, and in certain cases, reasoning. But I really see it as a continuum. And I think if we look back at, some of the advances in different industries that have occurred over the last few years, we can use that as guidance in thinking about how to create, additional opportunity. And so I kind of think about this in the framework that's outlined here, where, fundamentally, when you're thinking, especially in a global context, and you're orienting around, whether it's the global South or developing nations, what are those ways in which we can create additional opportunity so that there's an equitable kind of playing field that's developed across a number of different domains for countries where they're not as resource rich, they don't traditionally have the same opportunities. And so one way to think about it is that AI can be used to generate more value from the assets that are inherent within those countries, within those environments. AI can also be used to more thoughtfully identify opportunities to deploy capital. So you have assets, those assets have value, but then when you invest, you generate more value. And the more thoughtful you are about where to invest that capital and how to derive that value, leads to better outcomes. And so there's an opportunity to use AI to to identify what those opportunities to deploy capital are. We often think about constraints when we think about, resource poor, environments. We think about, logistical constraints, geopolitical constraints, financial constraints, health, education, other constraints. And I think in certain cases, what I've seen in some of the environments that I've operated in is that there's an opportunity in certain cases to transform these constraints into economic drivers. So not just to look at them as constraints that have to be mitigated, but look at them as unique characteristics of the environment, which we can then kind of flip on its head and transform into into greater kind of economic drivers. And then finally, one of the interesting patterns that's been true, it's true across the organization I'm at now, in healthcare, and it's also been true across, a few of the others that I've worked in, is that when you build AI, you're often in a commercial setting, building it for the most resource rich, audience, the luxury customer, the high paying enterprise. And it turns out that in many cases, those AI models that are built for that resource rich audience often have a direct application to the complete opposite side of the spectrum, to the resource poor audience. And it's interesting to contemplate that, again, across a number of industries. And we'll go through a couple examples, as I kind of walk through. And so this is really going to be oriented around my own journey, the companies that I've been at. I've been the chief technology officer of a number of the companies, that you see here, and then I've been a technology leader at, or a board member at a couple of the others. And across each of them, you'll see here, the different industries that are represented. Where we're talking about life sciences, we're talking about global payments, e-commerce, real estate, financing, healthcare, and small business growth. And across all of them, some of the patterns I laid out in the prior framework, have held to be, pretty consistent, and pretty true. So what I want to do is kind of a quick drive-by across each of these examples, which perhaps one or two of them will pique interest among the audience, and you can ask questions and ask me to drill in further. Some of the slides have a bit of technical detail. I'm a software engineer by training. I manage engineering and technology teams, but I'm not going to go into that technical detail for this audience, since we're much more oriented around the kind of general principles and the kind of relation of this work to the broader theme of global justice. But if you'd like me to go back and drill into some of those details, very happy to do that. I'm going to go in a bit of chronological order in terms of where I've been in my own journey. And that's the only real sequencing, that you'll see here. Well, let's start out with life sciences. So I was chief technology officer of a company called Nextdocs. And what we did there is that we would use AI to basically extract data from, typically in clinical trials, you have data that's kind of embedded within documents. There are documents that have to be written, authorized, approved, and there's a lot of inherent, kind of data within them that indicates the risk of a given drug, that's being developed. And clinical trials follow a multi-stage process where there's testing that's done, there's a workflow that, those results are taken through, and there's approvals that, kind of open the gate to additional testing, and then eventually towards the approval and the commercialization of a particular therapeutic that then benefits a population. And at the time, we were using AI to identify, where we might predict either the likelihood of success or the likelihood of failure at one step of that trial, which in aggregate allowed us to accelerate those trials' progress to market. We didn't have to go through as much testing as we would have otherwise had to go through. And that we were doing largely looking, at it from more of a predictive AI, more of a kind of quantitative, data analysis type perspective. But if we think about the potential of generative AI to understand the semantic meaning of, results that are coming in, and to correlate that with additional populations, with additional contexts, you can imagine the use cases that can be taken from this domain and then applied to the thinking around whether a newly developed, therapeutic could be accessible to the population within a developing country. And so this is, I think, a great example of that pattern of, we were working with the top pharma and med device companies in the US and the EU, helping them to get drugs to market sooner and safer to, their very resource rich environments, for obviously for commercial gain. But a lot of those patterns, if we then take those patterns, apply the modern generative AI capabilities, we very likely have the opportunity to accelerate the development of drugs that, would apply and address, many of the health conditions that exist in some of the some of the most struggling nations in the world. So that's our first example. Moving to a different domain, but one that also was directly serving the developing world. I helped start a company called Segovia. We were partnered with an NGO called Give Directly. Give Directly is an NGO that is focused on the direct distribution of cash into the hands of individuals within the developing world who are identified to be ones who might have an outsized benefit for leveraging that cash. So if you think about all the various different ways to kind of distribute international aid, often it's around food, it's around asset distribution, it's around training programs and so forth. But what Give Directly identified is the most efficient way to actually create positive outcomes is to directly provide cash to the individuals who can be as thoughtful as necessary on how to deploy that for themselves. They understand their own context and they understand their own ability to, use that to fund education, to buy food, to improve their housing or so forth. When we built Segovia, we built it to enable the flow of international development aid as direct cash transfers to those individuals, being able to send money directly from the Western world, so from institutions such as the USAID or DFID in the UK or other international agencies into the mobile wallets. Many of the individuals we were working with are unbanked, and so they used mobile phones as their key wallet. And so we built the ability for that cash to be distributed and deployed directly into those individuals' wallets across about 14 different countries. And we then expanded that so that commercial corporations could use the same. So if you were in agriculture, for example, you're a coffee company, and then you're sourcing your coffee beans from smallholder farmers in Ghana or in Uganda or wherever else, you could pay those individuals at the end of your supply chain directly instead of going through the multiple steps of middlemen and experiencing the fraud and mismanagement that typically occurs. The technical constraint in doing this, which ended up being a regulatory constraint as well, is that these financial flows were not regulated and were actually de-risked from the Western banks. So the Western banks did not allow for the transfer of money from a commercial account into the hands of an individual in one of these countries because identity was a challenge, because the verification of the account was a challenge, and because the overall kind of nature of the transaction was did not have the same kind of confidence and reliability that a typical B2C transaction in the Western world was able to have because of the data that we have in those financial networks. And so we leveraged artificial intelligence to basically inform the data collection on the individuals, the identity generation. We generated an identity by understanding multiple signals. Where does the person live? Who are they? Who are the others in their ecosystem? And then we translated all of that into facilitating the actual payment. And so if you think about the technical detail within a payment, you don't just have who it's going to and how much money it is, but you have where it's coming from, you have how frequently it's occurring, you have the overall amount, and you can use all of those inputs with AI to develop confidence that that payment is a legitimate payment, as opposed to a potentially fraudulent one. And so when we then were able to do that, we significantly increased the deployment of capital into the ecosystems within a number of different countries that allowed people to increase the value of their crops because they now had access to a broader customer base. It allowed people to invest in their community. It allowed people to invest in their home. It allowed people to invest in their education. And because we were using AI to kind of triangulate all this data and develop these risk models, we were also inherently developing models on where best to invest and deploy that capital. And if we again think about the capabilities that are now possible with the last year of growth in generative AI, I think you have the ability to take in a much more broader set of information, including unstructured information about, the weather in a given region, the economic and geopolitical context. You can actually converse with an individual and then take a transcript of that conversation and use that as input into developing your viewpoint on the identity and the creditworthiness and the reliability of the individual that you're, delivering a payment to. And all of these capabilities should be leveraged to unlock additional opportunity for those citizens of these countries who, in most cases are quite well deserving and would be quite great stewards of the capital that is being deployed to them. Um, the next company is Spring. So I was chief technology officer of a company that ended up building the largest fashion and beauty marketplace in the world. And so we were in the U.S. We then expanded to China, which is one of the largest e-commerce markets. And what we built was basically the ability for any retailer to connect their full catalog to us, and then created a single place where all of the fashion and beauty products that are available, across, let's say, for example, the entire Nike catalog, the entire Michael Kors or Levi's catalog, to be available in a single place, and therefore to be available to a broad kind of customer population, without the constraints of having a retailer who does merchandising, who's very selective about what products they pick and choose to, put onto their, retail site. So if you think about this, you might be thinking, well, don't the Amazons and the eBays of the world already do this? Well, it turns out they make it quite difficult for a seller to be able to just bolt on, their entire catalog. They're more focused on having the seller make individual decisions about what products to put and manage those products and the entire sales process within the context of their, catalog, where we flipped that around and we said, as long as you connected with us, we're going to use AI to extract all the information from your catalog, to make decisions on pricing, promotions, to facilitate the shipping, to facilitate the returns, and to also help correlate what products align with what others. So if someone's buying product A, here's product B, C, and D that they might be interested in buying. So you hear this, and you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with the developing world? This is a pure for-profit commercial, high-end, use case. And while that is true, I think it provides a pattern by which products that are being developed in the developing world, merchants who exist in the developing world, who have products that, deserve to see a broader audience, can use the power of generative AI to essentially connect the product information, the, ability to do shipping and so forth, into the scaled e-commerce marketplaces of the world. And so I think it's another opportunity to kind of flip the model and think about how can we, create a world where this broad kind of long tail of creative talent that exists in many of these countries, where they're producing assets that they frankly don't have the ability to commercialize. We can use AI to kind of facilitate the overall commercialization of these assets, and then, in effect, deploy more capital, to those individuals. A similar market where we were building a company, focused on the high end, focused on, the US, but the patterns are likely applicable to the developing world, is Compass Real Estate, where, we ended up building what became the largest real estate brokerage by volume in the United States. So outdoing or outpacing, some of the companies that had been around for decades. And one of the tools that we used to do that was artificial intelligence, where, we would take homes that were typically described in simple parameters. Here's how many bedrooms, here's how many bathrooms, here's how much square footage. And we would use photography to extract, this is a beautiful white kitchen with great windows. This is a home that evokes, these emotions. This is a home within this neighborhood that's a very walkable, community. There's all of these different attributes of a home that you can identify if you deploy, kind of modern AI tools into the understanding of a context, within the data set that you have. That helps you identify what homes are most likely to sell, what homes are perhaps not on the market, but would benefit from being on the market. And one of the other things you can do, if you've ever bought a home, you probably have thought about, well, okay, here's a home, I'm interested in buying it, but when I move in, I'm going to renovate the kitchen. I'm going to furnish the environment, and it's going to look differently than it does when I'm buying the home. We actually, what you see a graphic of here is we built an AI tool that allowed you to kind of slide and visualize what might the home look like with your own creativity deployed, within to it. This helped us sell the highest end homes in the country. But if you think about the underlying pattern here, which is understanding the value of a given asset, in this case, it was a home, using multiple different modalities and multiple different data sources to generate the full context of how that home might provide value to a potential buyer. That pattern deployed into a world where you don't have the same formality or rigor around home ownership, around titles, around um, the marketplaces that exist to conduct real estate, has the possibility to create value for homeowners in the developing nation, where someone who has a home in a location where it's growing in relevance because of increasing market activity, or they've invested in it, but now they may not realize that they have the ability to extract more value from that investment, and then kind of move on to a better home. Using some of these generative AI capabilities that we deployed in the highest end of the US market has the ability to perhaps also be deployed into the most unstructured and kind of resource constrained markets in the developing world. So a couple more examples. From a financing perspective, I was chief technology officer of this company called ClearCo. And what we did is we provided funding to small businesses where, instead of the typical approach where the business would apply for a loan to a bank, we ended up connecting with every data source that we could find about them: their bank account, their payment processor, if they were in e-commerce, their marketplace, the underlying AML and sanctions facilities, as well as kind of marketing. We were assessing the impact of their social marketing and so forth. And analyzing all of these using AI, we were able to do our own underwriting of the business without them actually coming to us and applying and expressing their own characteristics of their business. We ended up doing this on a worldwide basis, and we ended up funding businesses around the world that were single proprietor, kind of mom and pop shops that didn't have access to traditional capital, that didn't have access to kind of express the potential of their business in the way that they would normally get a loan. But using the AI platform that we built, they were able to access, a significantly larger degree of capital than they would have otherwise. And so I think, again, here it was a quite quantitative exercise that we were going through. We were looking at all their quantitative data across these sources, using more predictive AI to predict what their future revenue growth would be. When I think about the adaptation of that into a generative AI world, I think about, just bringing in a much broader set of information sources and then providing that business with much more guidance around, where they might deploy investment, and not only how they can receive the investment, but how they might choose to market, how they might choose to sell and merchandise the products. And I think, again, like in the previous example, there's a lot of small business owners, sole proprietors, people who are selling in a local market who might have the ability to, provide their products in a to a much broader audience with this type of thinking around the leveraging of AI, within their environment. I'm currently at a company called Atria Health. We started this company about 4.5 years ago, and we started it to build the premier healthcare practice focused on preventative primary care. So when we think about what healthcare should be, it should be focused on the prevention of disease, not just on the treatment of disease. And it should also be focused on optimizing someone's health, not just focused on ensuring that they don't suffer from disease. And so when you think about the underlying components required here, there's a number of diagnostics that are relevant: labs, imaging, other testing. There's also a number of disciplines that are relevant, not just working with the primary care practitioner, but a cardiologist, a neurologist, a gynecologist, dermatologist, a physical movement, physical therapy individual, and really looking at the full, kind of data set around a human and assessing from a cross-disciplinary and from a, kind of preventative basis, what are they most likely to have a risk of, occurring in their life? And then how might we prevent it? And then what do we understand about their health, and where are the opportunities to intervene, whether it's diet, exercise, supplements, medication, lifestyle changes to improve their health condition. We are currently live in Manhattan, South Florida, and we are most definitely serving, individuals who have the resources to be able to afford these types of services. But what's been interesting is we've built the underlying AI platform that analyzes all the data inherent within, all of these healthcare kind of data sets that we have, is that these same approaches, if we think about deploying this to kind of the bottom of the pyramid, those individuals who don't have as much access into the healthcare system today, and for whom oftentimes those diseases go undetected much longer than average because they haven't been regularly interacting with the healthcare system, those are likely the individuals who would most benefit from the type of diagnostics and the type of preventive practices that are available with today's science. And so again, here, I think there's an opportunity to think about leveraging, both the access that we can provide to diagnostic capabilities and the use of AI to effectively allocate which capabilities are relevant to which audiences to essentially prevent issues before they occur, and not only improve people's health span, but also take significant cost out of the system, which in a world that, is often constrained by access to great healthcare, thinking about it from the perspective of how might I use, AI to best predict what is the most likely issue you might face, has a way of, potentially preventing an issue before it occurs, and at a system-wide level, having a lower cost profile than, what it would otherwise. And the final organization I'll talk about, which is directly focused on the developing world, is an NGO called Building Markets, where I sit on the board, and the organization is solely focused on providing funding for small businesses that are being built in the most resource constrained environments. So we work in countries like Colombia, Turkey, Myanmar, countries that have conflict, countries that have had natural disasters that have constrained the environments. And what we've found is that when we have individuals who are in those countries working with small business owners, and these could be restaurant owners, these could be handicraft makers, these could be manufacturers of, simple products. When our staff has gone into these environments and interacted in person with some of these business founders, they develop a perspective for which are the businesses that are most worthy of, investment, and which businesses might see the most benefit from, the deployment of capital. And they also have the ability to connect local buyers into, the local ecosystem for supply. So a great example of this is in the hospitality. We've worked with, for example, the Hilton Foundation. They have provided funding here to build the program, and they now can do procurement with this platform where, when they're opening up a hotel in Bogota, or they're opening up a hotel in Istanbul, they're able to source the products they need for that hotel directly from the local merchants, not from the international suppliers that they typically use. And the reason they're able to do that is because the AI is helping them understand who's likely to be the most reliable supplier, who's likely to have the most relevant products for us. So again, it's an opportunity to create growth in the developing world, using assets that already exist within those within those countries. So that was what I wanted to cover. So thank you all for listening through my quick drive-by of all those experiences. And hopefully, as you listen to those, you're able to appreciate, what some of the patterns are, across the board, and where I think there's significant opportunity to think about creating equity in the world, whether it's financial, healthcare, education, real estate, or other domains.
Thank you for sharing your journey, and for bringing this perspective into discussion. I'm gonna ask, Thomas has a question, and I think maybe Jim has another question.
Yeah, but you can go first if you want, of course. Or did you not?
Oh, it doesn't matter. You haven't spoken today, so you go first.
Okay, so no, I was actually referring to Diana because I didn't know whether
Diana.
she had a question or
Oh,
not.
she,
No. I was just
So
writing questions.
thank you for this tour de force. And what I see as when you talk about patterns at the end, what I see as a key pattern is that you make markets more efficient by giving people more choice and by reducing transaction costs and more information. And I have two questions about that. One is there an offsetting problem of information overload? So as people have access to a lot more options, is there, can you help in some way to organize people's options to make sure that the increase in choice is not becoming oppressive, right? There's the famous story about too many cereals on the supermarket shelf and so on. And the other thing I wanted to ask, in particular in connection to Spring, but also more generally, is whether you incorporate or could incorporate other parameters than quality into the information that you provide for products and services. So, for example, if the potential buyer knows that a product is sourced from a small business in a developing country, that might count with the buyer as a point in favor of buying it. And so you might provide that information, or you might build it into the search algorithm so that, for example, the small firms of that sort are shown first before you then show the usual big multinationals.
Yeah. So, you asked two questions. Try to cover each of them. So first, you were talking about information overload, and I think the way we need to think about that is, the kind of emerging pattern within the generative AI ecosystem is around using agents. So instead of thinking about it as one AI that's orchestrating everything, you think about it as building a series of AI agents that each have a purpose. This agent's job is to do X, Y, Z. And so in that model, the way I think we need to, handle it is basically that there's agents whose job it is to do the curation and to do the ranking and the prioritization. They may not be as perfect as a human would be, but that trade-off is a required trade-off to allow the human to have a much more consumable, information source. And so when you put these things kind of, you have one agent who's generating the information, generating the opportunity, identifying, and then you have another agent who is basically saying, well, you've given me all of this, and I'm only looking for A, B, and C, and therefore I'm going to curate all of these outputs into these small set. You end up kind of reaching an equilibrium in terms of having a consumable, set of information. The second question you asked, remind me again what the
It is whether information about the nature of the supplier could be worked into the information that you give.
It actually was. So in both the e-commerce use case and the real estate use case, the when as you mentioned, it was about creating an efficient marketplace through information curation. The AI was one of the prime kind of values of the AI was in extracting, categorizing, and presenting a much more relevant and broader set of information. So it wasn't just about quality, but it was about things like, this product is supplied by this individual or from this country. This product has been appreciated by buyers who have these other, characteristics. So there's a number of different things you can describe. One of the ways to think about it is if you have a human selling a home or you have a human selling a piece of clothing, what are the things that human says to get you to buy? They don't just harp on the fact, look, it's blue, it's blue, it's blue. But that's what the e-commerce site says. But the human will say, that looks great on you. The last time I saw, there've been 5 other dads who've walked in and they've all, looked great in that shirt. You're going to look great in that shirt. They're thinking about things in that way to kind of connect the product to, what your intent is. And that's where there's opportunity for AI to both extract those characteristics and then map them to the potential buyer. And real estate, I think, is a great example of this as well. When, the broker takes you into a home, they don't talk about, look at the 5 bedrooms. They talk about, wouldn't you love cooking in this kitchen, and look how, sunny it is. And that's the kind of thing that generative AI has the potential to help with.
I was, I'm blown away by your productivity. What an amazing career. I don't know how you can keep it up, but the central theme here is that we have a lot of different technologies that can be applied to particular problems. I wanted to drill down on two. One is this example you cited of compliance and fintech, and I've been coming at that from another direction, which is, how do we get a whole handle on controlling money laundering? And what are the existing agencies doing? Well, there's a whole alphabet soup, as you know, of outfits that are vaguely involved in that. They're pretty incompetent. And so there's this huge compliance industry that's grown up in banking. So I guess the lessons learned from that is that, there ought to be a way of having people register or companies register and qualify for some kind of certificate that says, I'm clean, I've been approved, I can take this to any bank, I can open accounts, I can transfer money internationally. And, have you given any thought to sort of attacking that central rat's nest of compliance regulation, which is a disaster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a it's a complex problem the world's best thinkers are thinking about. So I'm not going to give you a 30-second, solution to it, but I'll give you a couple of patterns that I think are inherent to consider. So one is, my experience with that world when I was, with the payments company, and I'm still on the board of Diameter Pay, which you know well from David Lighton, is that the that world is largely focused on liability reduction. Like the job of an AML firm or individual or technology is mostly to ensure that every known risk is identified, so that if something does occur, the liability on that layer is as close to zero as possible. So it's, in a weird way, not as much about identifying the unknown risks. It's more about identifying the known risks so that liability is reduced. And that's where I think the some of the simulation and modeling that is possible with generative AI, including, kind of the attempts to model human behavior is, is more possible than it was before. You could basically, as a, let's take it as a, kind of a contrived or, silly example. If you think about, there's now marketplaces to, transact on all kinds of things, whether it's, sites that allow people to, post pictures of themselves and pay for them, or sites that allow, content to be distributed, or, whatever. You might be able to train an AI to basically say, model yourself as a human interacting with this site. What is the purchase pattern that you might have on that site? Model yourself as someone who wants to, stay under the radar of, transferring money through that site, leave it undetected to, the authorities. What are the patterns that you might, employ? And then you could have another agent, which basically says, imagine yourself monitoring this site. What are the things that you might be looking for? And then you could actually have them play off each other and run a simulation, which then, perhaps detects the unexpected patterns, so that you're not relying on the AML world, which, as you said, is quite slow moving and is more about taking known risks and known patterns and just ensuring they don't happen again, but instead simulating how human behavior is going to lead to, unknown patterns, occurring in the future.
Is there an opportunity for private initiative in that area where you could have, a lot of banks are spending a ton of money on compliance, and it's just not, it's not working. But is there, would they outsource it to?
Well, obviously the, the regulatory role cannot be, if anything, should be greater, not lesser.